Hi guys, and welcome to our first of many sales nuggets that we are going to share with you. My name is Fani Skarlson, this is Peter Viljoen, and we'll be taking you through a little bit of a journey, and we're going to talk about especially what happened with the mystery shop that's been rolling out throughout the network, right, Pete?
No, for sure. So everybody would have seen at least their video of the mystery shopping. And we've been privy to that as well. And there were some golden threads that came out of there. There were certainly some common threads that came out throughout the dealer network. We're going to be tackling all of those. There were four main ones in particular. What we're going to talk about today is how do you close a deal?
Interesting, because this is a bit of a topic where it can go in a lot of different ways, because traditionally in the automotive industry, we've been taught how to close deals, but is that still relevant today?
Absolutely not. And I think that's one of the reasons why we are seeing people and sales execs that are hesitant to even try close deals, because they realize that the techniques that we were perhaps taught in the 80s and 90s are pretty cringeworthy, to say the least.
Yeah.
And perhaps they're staying away from that.
What are some of those examples? Let's start with the cringeworthy stuff. Give me some of the examples of the stuff that we not supposed to be doing today.
Well, you know, you've got techniques like the arm around the customer technique, and then the walk around the dealership technique.
Yeah.
You've got the apology technique.
Yeah.
You know, almost looking for sympathy.
Yeah.
Then you've got the one that I hate the most, where you get your colleague to walk up to your desk and say, "Hey, Fani, listen, have you sold this customer the car? Because I've got a customer who wants this car now." You know, really cheesy stuff. The balance sheet close, all those kind of things. You know, the 90s are calling for those techniques, and we're dealing with a modern customer now, Fani.
Yeah.
You know, and we go through this every single time, and we talk about the four things that are important to a customer.
Yeah. So speed, information, convenience, and choice. And I think if we go back into our sales process and we think about how to apply those, then we'll be able to come up with some pretty decent and modern techniques on how to close a deal. Right.
And let's give everybody hope. I mean, you know, in our customer centricity program, we talk about the bar being low.
Yeah.
Here's a stat that's gonna scare a lot of people, or motivate a lot of people.
Yeah.
So 78% of customers who go onto a showroom floor have the intention of purchasing.
It just makes 100% sense, because think about it, guys. Would you take the time out of your day to go to a shop, right, to just go and look at the products? Honestly, I don't think, 78% of our customers makes a huge amount of sense. We're going to go to a shop to buy something. You know, if you go to a car dealership, right, physically, that means that you have gone through most of the sales process. You are at the end of the buying process, and you're ready to purchase.
So the question is why? Why is there such a big disconnect between the 78% customers who are really intent on purchasing and our low closing rates that we're actually seeing?
Because the national sort of closing average on walk-ins is around 10%.
Yeah, for the good sales execs.
So that's a huge disconnect, Pete, right? So if almost 80% of the customers walking into the dealership wants to buy a car, and we are only selling to 10% of them, there's a huge problem.
So one of the things that we see constantly whenever we do our exercises with our induction program, and we go out on a mystery shop with the new delegates, and we measure this ourselves as well in our own research. One of the things that we see, and we definitely saw this in the mystery shopping videos, is that only 1 out of 9 customer names are actually recorded.
That's insane.
Can you imagine the leakage?
Yeah. So that already speaks to why we're only getting a 10% closing ratio. But to make that worse, is that 83% of sales executives abandon leads after just one contact. Okay, so if you take that and the fact that we're only taking 1 out of 9 people's names down when they come into our dealership, and then after we do that, we only contact them once, where it takes up to 12 interactions to actually close the deal. Okay, that then makes a lot of sense why the closing ratio is so low.
So now that brings us to some of the techniques that we can apply to increase our closing rates. And this is we're going to try to keep this as short and sweet as possible, a little 5-minute nugget. But I mean, if we have a look at some of the things that we're seeing, especially from the mystery shopping surveys, one of the things that I certainly noticed is that we're not adhering to the sales process. And I think that's a real pity. And I think that's also causing us massive lost opportunities.
Absolutely. So in the bronze sales program, we take you guys through the basic sales process that a customer needs to go through for them to be ready to purchase a car. Okay. And that's the meet and greet. It's the needs analysis and qualification stage, then the vehicle selection, then the presentation of the vehicle, then the demo drive, and then the
negotiations.
But the vehicle, if there's a used vehicle, the trade-in evaluation, your negotiation, your close, etc., your delivery. So that's the steps that we need to follow, right? But we see that even though we know this, we're still trying to take shortcuts.
But why?
I think, Pete, let's be honest, okay? We are a high-volume brand.
Yep.
Okay, so we are busy. We've got sales executives delivering 20, 30 cars a month, right?
Yep.
There's a hell of a lot of interest in our brand. So we've got people coming into the dealership, phoning, leads coming in digitally. We are busy.
Yeah.
Okay. The the irony in this is that if we slow it down a little bit and follow the sales process, we would actually save time.
And sell more cars.
Correct.
And that's what we want to try and encourage you to do. So Brian Tracy talks about this. And if you don't know Brian Tracy, he's a sales guru. You really need to look him up.
Yeah.
And he talks about a couple of things as to why the sales process is so important when it comes to closing a deal. The first is that one of the things that's stopping us closing a deal is price.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we don't adhere to the sales process, price is always going to remain a very high premium for the customer. That's going to be number one importance for the customer. Brian Tracy talks about conducting yourself like a sales assassin. You got to have your revolver.
Yeah.
And every step that you do well in your sales process, you're adding another round to the chamber.
Yeah.
So you do a proper meet and greet. You put a round in the chamber. You do a proper qualification, which is very important.
Yes.
Another round in the chamber. Needs analysis, round in the chamber. So we go on. Your demo, your negotiation skills, your follow-ups, all those kind of things. And eventually you're going to have a chamber full of bullets. And actually, what's going to happen is you're going to get to a point where you're sitting at your desk with a customer across the desk from you, and you're going to be going to yourself, you know what? I've actually done everything to the best of my ability for this customer. I really deserve their business. And if you're thinking that way, the customer is reciprocating that thinking, and they're sitting on the other side of the desk going, wow, this person's really put in an effort. They've impressed me. I've bought into them. They deserve my business.
Correct.
Now, how do we tell if we've got to that stage with a customer? And there's a few things that we can actually give you some suggestions, and we're gonna take you through those now.
Right. So first of all, using the sales process as the ultimate closing tool, right?
Yep.
So follow your process, making sure that the close is actually just the natural next step.
Yes.
Does it make sense? Like you just said, if I've gone through all of these things, the natural thing for us to do now, Mr. Customer, is to close the deal.
Spot on.
All right. So that's sort of the first thing. Use your sales process, go through the motions, tick all the boxes, and then the close is the natural next step. Right. The next thing that we want to talk about, the next tip that we want to give you guys is understanding what the modern customer wants. And we've already alluded to this, and we said speed, information, convenience, and choice.
Yeah.
We can use that as a closing technique. All right.
For sure.
So
and we speak about it, on the Gold program, the fast thinking, for example, is part of that.
Correct. Yeah. Right. So if you are the sales executive that is the quickest, okay, that adds a percentage to the chances of closing this deal.
Yeah.
Because the customer is dealing with up to 9 other salespeople at the same time.
For sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you can be the quickest in the responses, in getting the information to the customer, getting the deals done, etc., speed, number one. Information. If you can be the sales expert, right, that gives the customer the best information, the clearest information, make it easy for them to understand all of the complex things that we deal with, then that adds to the percentage of the closing chances, right? You
Yep.
agree with me?
Spot on.
Okay, convenience. Being the sales executive that this customer is dealing with, that is the most convenient. Okay, what does that mean? That means helping the customer with stuff like the finance process. That's such a huge schlep. If you can be the salesperson that makes it more convenient for the customer to go through all of those hoops,
Because it's painful.
it's painful, then you've got a better chance of closing the deal.
Yep.
And then choice, guys, this is a huge one. Understanding that your customer does not want to be sold to. They don't want to feel like you are selling something to them. They want to feel like they're making a decision.
And I want to add on to that, because the other thing that we see that hurts our closing ability is the fact that we've become so transactional in the way that we do business, and that turns customers off. If a customer comes in and says, tell me about this vehicle, of course we've got to have product knowledge, but if you just start firing off features and the price, you haven't tapped into the emotions of the customer.
Exactly.
If you slow down and you tell the customer how this car is going to make them feel if they purchase it, you've put them in a different headspace, and then you can start wrapping it up with the features and pricing, etc. So we've got to learn to just, again, slow down a little bit on this, and rather work on the emotions of the customer and telling them how this vehicle is going to make them feel.
Exactly.
And get them to start imagining themselves in this vehicle as well. And that brings us up to one of the closing techniques, which is, of course, is the test drive.
Yeah. And also one of the key areas that we need to focus on with the information that we've received from our mystery shop exercise. Closing with the test drive, guys. When we do our sales training, we harp on this.
Yeah.
This is the only opportunity that you have to give your customer a chance to take mental ownership of the product and have that emotional connection with the product. If you don't do a test drive, you are taking away that hugely important factor in the sales process.
And we've got to be scientific about it as well, Fani. So when we're doing the test drive, the language that we're using with the customer must be encouraging them to think that this is their car.
Yeah.
You know, right down to where we park the demo vehicle afterwards must be next to their car, so that when they get out, everybody turns around and looks at their car. Now they're going to turn around and look at it, and they're going to see, damn, this is brand new vehicle. My car's old.
Yeah.
You know, so it's all these kind of things. You know, can you see yourself in this vehicle? How did it feel? Did it make you feel good? All these kind of things, you know. And
that's when the customer starts having these sorts of discussions with you on the test drive, talking as if they own the vehicle.
Yeah.
And you cannot have that if you don't do a test drive. You're not going to have that conversation anywhere else in the sales process. Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4, okay, the power of nonchalant closing questions.
Yes.
Okay, so what does that mean?
So, you know, we don't have to ask for a hard close. I think that's what people are scared about. So with the nonchalant closing questions, we reducing the customer's resistance to us. We're dropping their barriers, because remember, they're protecting themselves. So we're going to ask them casual, sort of low pressure questions. We're gonna assume that they're going to be purchasing the vehicle with the kind of language that we're using. And, you know, we're shifting focus from yes, no questions to rather this is an easy decision for the customer to make.
And therein lies the importance of the needs analysis and the qualification, because if you did this properly, then you've got plenty of questions to ask the customer in this nonchalant closing question sort of technique.
100%.
Right?
So the nonchalant closing is also, by the way, a nice way to set up the next event in the sales process.
Correct. Okay, so that brings us to technique number 5, all right? Leveraging authority to close more sales. Guys, I cannot stress this enough, okay? Using your manager, or more likely your F&I manager, to be part of the sales process is one of the most powerful closing techniques that I've ever seen in practice, right?
100%. I mean, imagine you, the F&I, rather than waiting until we want to introduce you to the F&I because we want to sell you finance and insurance, we get the F&I introduced a little bit earlier. So, hey, this is Fani. He's the F&I. A little bit later, we're going to be going to Fani, but we just wanted to let you know that he's going to be helping you with your finance and insurance needs when the time arises.
Exactly. And remember that I know that a lot of you guys out there are NCA qualified, etc., etc. But a customer's just got this authority thing in the back of their mind where they are more comfortable talking to the bank manager than to the sales executive about their finances, right? Okay, because they feel like they are talking to the authority on the subject. So if we get the F&I involved in the process, the customer, right then when the customer is there at the dealership, they'll ask the questions that they might not necessarily ask you as a sales executive, have the answers, have the solutions, and we can, close the deal.
Spot on. I had an experience recently purchasing a vehicle, and the dealer principal of this dealership introduced himself to me first, and then informed me that he had updated and got the sales executive up to speed with all my requirements, and handed it over to the sales exec and said, "This guy's empowered to make this happen for you."
Awesome.
What an amazing experience.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, and then the last technique that we want to give you guys as a sort of tip is the trial close, Pete. Testing the readiness before the final close. So these are almost like mini closes, right? I almost talk about asking yes questions.
Well, you can also ask confirmation questions. So how did this make you feel is a question. Was the vehicle as quiet as I explained it? Did you feel the comfort in this vehicle? All those kind of things. Could you imagine yourself driving this vehicle on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah.
All those kind of questions.
Is this vehicle the solution that you are looking for?
Correct. So if it is the solution that you're looking for, can we maybe just get to the paperwork?
Yeah.
And that's the trial close at the end of the day. So once the customer's made a few affirmations that they're happy, and you realize that there's very little objections left over, then you go, all right, great. So the next step, you're not saying to the guy, "Can we now get you? Are you going to buy now?" Rather, you're saying, "All right, our next logical step in the process is we need to sign the OTP, and I'm going to put an offer in front of you over here, or we can go to the F&I and we can complete the paperwork with the F&I."
Yes.
And if the customer is not willing, they're going to say, "No, I'm not ready at the moment. I have a few queries, or I'm not, I need time to think about it," which is the worst objection you can get.
Yeah.
But if the customer says, "Sure, let's go, let's fill out the paperwork, or let's go see the F&I," that's your trial close. You're 99% of the way there.
Awesome. Ultimately, Pete, the biggest issue here is not sticking and following the sales process, because all of these that we spoke about is not applicable if you're not following a sales process. You can't use trial close. You can't use a test drive to close the deal if you don't do a test drive. You can't use authority if you don't introduce the manager as part of, or the F&I as part of your sales process. Yeah. So the bottom line here, guys, the big magic trick to do here is to follow the sales process.
Follow the sales process and have the courage of your conviction. If you've done it properly, you're going to get the deal if you ask for it.
Awesome. Have a good one. Happy selling. Close those deals.
Cheers, everyone.